This is the Extensionists, Conversations with Great Thinkers in Agriculture. I'm Toban Dyck.
And I'm Whetter. Hey, Toban.
Hey, Jay. How's it going?
Have you ever been to P.E.I?
No, but I do like potatoes.
Yeah. Potatoes are a big crop there, as we'll find out from Ryan Barrett, our next guest. I've been there a couple of times. I was there with my parents, and then we went with our kids. And it's lovely. We went, I won't give too many details, but I'm a prairie boy, right? And we went mackerel fishing.
Like in the ocean?
Bobbing. Just imagine bobbing on this little boat out in the ocean, rising, falling. Anyway, I didn't do it. I didn't do well.
How old were you?
Like 40 something.
So a kid. Well,
Yeah.
I get it.
I'm not great with sea. I'm okay with a big boat like a BC ferry.
Sure.
I'm okay on the lakes. But when you get that kind of bobbing
Yeah,
and you're in a little boat, and you know what?
I've done it.
When you're motoring, it's fine.
Sure.
But when you stop and either whale watch or drop a line.
Yeah.
Anyway, but thank goodness this conversation today isn't about the sea. It's about the land, the bright red mud.
Did you catch any?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Well, we did.
Right.
I'm not sure if I caught a fish.
You were.
Yeah, so mackerel,
over the boat,
mackerel
into the ocean.
schooling. Yeah, exactly. Mackerel are a schooling fish, and so you drop a line with a bunch of hooks on it, and then when you're reeling in, you're often catching. If you've gone through a school,
oh, I see.
You're catching 5 on the same string.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're like jigging for them, kind of.
Yeah.
Like you're not trolling for them. No.
No, we're dropping a line
Yeah.
down and hoping that the school there, and the guy who was in the boat, I guess he knows where the schools are because we caught probably 10 of them.
Oh yeah, nice.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah. What else did we do there? We rented a little cottage on the water.
I'm just trying to think of stories now.
Looked over the.
I don't know what
are we supposed to wrap up? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so P.E.I. Go rent a cottage. Just hang out by the sea. Go to a lobster supper.
Oh.
We went to Cavendish and saw Anne of Green Gables' house and all that kind
Yeah,
of stuff. But that's
you got to do that.
Yeah.
But
we
would too.
Yeah, go to listen to some music and
Jamie,
just enjoy the quiet pastoral lifestyle of P.E.I.
like Atlantic Canada. I mean, just like last summer was my first time going to the East Coast.
Yeah.
It was Halifax and Nova Scotia. And I'm going again. I went to Nova Scotia twice last summer. And I'm going to New Brunswick this summer. So it's been interesting. But that's last summer being my first time. So it's just I do love it. I feel like it is magical, and pastoral is a great word to describe it. But no, I'm excited to talk to our next guest.
So our guest is Ryan Barrett. He's a research and agronomy specialist with the P.E.I. Potato Board. And it's the Extensionists expanding our wings to Eastern Canada. Oh.
Enjoy.
On to Ryan.
Are you curious about what Jay and I get up to behind the scenes at the Extensionists?
The Extensionist has a newsletter. We'd love you to subscribe. We give you exclusive content, some behind the scenes,
and important updates. You're never going to miss an episode again.
Please sign up at theextensionist.com.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for joining us. You are our first podcast guest from P.E.I., so that's exciting. That's exciting for Jay and I. Jay, you look like you want to say something.
I was just going to say, Ryan Barrett is a research and agronomy specialist with the P.E.I. Potato Board. I got that right?
Sure did.
Do I got that right? Oh man, I'm off to a good start.
Yeah.
Do I have
it's Monday.
Right?
It's Monday.
Yeah. We usually record on Fridays when our voices are all limbered up.
Yeah.
It's our first Monday.
No, exactly. So welcome here. I don't know. Do you know? Have we ever met, Ryan? I don't know if we have.
I don't think we have. I think I've seen some of your work in the past, and I know Ashley a bit through her past life with SpudSmart, and so know more about what Burr Forest is up to and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Well, that's great. And then so Jay.
Hi Ryan. I'm Jay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So Toban and I are podcast partners, and I'm a journalist from the prairies primarily. And I'm not sure, I've probably done a potato article because I used to work for the General Farm paper in Manitoba, and there's some potatoes here. So, yeah, but it's been a while.
Manitoba and Alberta are getting to be bigger and bigger potato country all the time. So,
yeah, and where I'm from, here in the Red River Valley, there's a few big kind of potato producers, southern potato, and a few other ones. So that's kind of
Quaker Farms and that sort of crew. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Quakers, they're all around. Yeah, for sure. No, so this is really, really exciting. I know Ashley, in the pre-interview, she'd mentioned, you know, we had some notes and stuff talking about your communications background and how, you know, you have lots of experience in communications, and now you're working in a research capacity. So that's an interesting trajectory. If you want to talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
and it's kind of. It's funny. So, like, I went to university for dairy genetics. I did animal science undergrad because I thought I was going to be a vet, and then I realized I didn't want to be a vet, and then I went into more of a genetics standpoint. But it was always around. I wanted to work with farmers, and I wanted to work with farmers finding solutions and doing things better and that sort of stuff. And then I worked in communications largely then for a dairy breed association for about 7 years. And I was doing a magazine, and I was doing a website, and I was doing, extension events and things, and writing articles. And then that kind of, it still was doing some more scientific genetic stuff as part of that too, but it was always about communicating with producers and, again, helping solve problems, help identify information and bring it to them. And then when I moved back to P.E.I, I had the opportunity to come work at the potato board, and I was initially hired on that experience in communications, and they were kind of just getting around to having a more grower facing website, and they were trying to do more on the research side. And then that over time it morphed from being just comms into then research and extension, and really focusing on not just pure research in any way. I wouldn't call myself a pure researcher by any means, but that plus then doing some amount of research, mostly field scale research, and then bringing that back to the producers and working with producers on the trials, and then communicating those results back to producers, as well as all the good stuff that's happening in other places that we don't necessarily have to replicate here that can be brought back to producers as well. So building that network with other potato regions and other potato researchers, and agriculture is a big industry. Parts of agriculture can be a small world, and potatoes particularly. There's probably only 500 potato growers in all of Canada, right? So, and then in terms of the agronomists and the people that work in that, it's not a massive world, but it's important. They're spread out over a big geography, and then connecting with people in the United States or connecting with people in Europe and what's being done in other places. There's a lot of need to. We can't replicate everything. You can't do every project. You can't. You have to be able to see what's happening in other places and see how we can bring that back here too. So that's kind of how my position sort of evolved over time, and has kind of been where it is now.
We're going to get to all that in a sec, Ryan, but I want to go back to something you said at the beginning about how you thought you might want to be a vet, but then you realized you didn't want to be. And I just wondering, was there a day or a moment? Was it when you had to pull on that really long glove? Mind you grew up with cattle, so you probably did that as a kid.
It wasn't necessarily it wasn't one of those light bulb moments. It was a confluence of things at the time. So this is late 90s, early 2000s. At the time here, there was a glut of large animal vets that now people are screaming for large animal vets, but at the time it seemed like there was a lot of people going through for not a lot of jobs. And it wasn't a secure path forward, and the amount of time and education and on the job training and everything, it seemed like it was a long road to hoe, and it was a long road to hoe for being. I wanted to be a large animal vet, and a large animal vet spends 90% of their day with their arm up a cow's backside. So it was kind of like, okay, so you really want to do that? And I was particularly, my idea was around, like I grew up with purebred dairy, and that was what my interest was. I wanted to be an embryo vet. I wanted to be a guy that did embryo flushes and stuff like that. And that's like 95% time with a cow's
I was just going to say that.
So it was just like, okay, like, I get that this is important and I get this is interesting, but do I want to work my guts out to get, like, you needed 92% average in university to get into a small amount of seats in vet school, and then 80-hour weeks in vet school and 80-hour weeks the first 4 or 5 years at a vet school, and then for maybe not having job security. And a lot of people I knew that were going to vet school out here were having to go to the States to get jobs. I didn't want to go to the States. So there's just a lot of things that kind of come together. You're like, there's maybe a route forward where I do what I want to do. And the big thing is I wanted to be involved in the dairy industry. I still wanted to be involved in the dairy industry in some fashion, because that was a bit of a passion for me, and it still is. And I was able to find that middle ground by, I still have an involvement with the Milking Shorthorn Society in a kind of a part-time, communications secretary role that I do. And that's the breed of cows we have at home right now, and we've had forever. And so I can still maintain that connection to the farm, maintain that connection with the industry without having that necessarily to be my full-time job. And now it actually works out reasonably well, because now I can have my job as a potato agronomist and extension officer and whatever, and I can still go home and milk cows in the evening if I want to, or go help them put silage up or whatever. So it's kind of a nice balance.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Well, I mean, cows are pretty cute animals, but from the face side. But when you're spending 95% of your time around the back end. And I was just doing the math. So you said 80 hours times 95% is what, 76 hours a week with your hand up the backside of a cow.
Yeah. No, it was more than enough. Yeah, more than enough.
Yeah. Okay, so potatoes. So you're in Guelph for a bit, and then you worked in Guelph for a number of years, then moved back home to P.E.I.
Yep.
And then got the potato job.
Yeah.
After you'd moved home. So what took you home in the first place?
Oh, it was kind of one of those things of, I knew I wanted to be away for a bit, because you wanted to, like, everybody in P.E.I. goes away for a while. At least that's the way it always was. Like, my graduating class from high school, I think 2/3 of them went away to university and then either didn't come back or didn't come back for a while. And that was just kind of what everybody's always done in P.E.I. Go away for a while and move back later. It's not. Now there's more opportunities at home than there was. So post Confederation Bridge, post investments in the industry and that sort of thing, like PEI's got a little more diversified economy than it did 25 or 30 years ago. And so fewer people have to go away to make their living or get their start. But that being said, I had the opportunity to come home. A lot of my Guelph friends that I'd gone through grad school with or that I'd met in Guelph all moved on to other jobs too and left Guelph. And there was a point where I was kind of last man standing of my group. Everybody else had gone to Ottawa or gone to somewhere. And then I was, I was kind of, last guy standing a little bit. And then also, like, my boss changed, and then I applied for that manager role, did not get it. New person hired, new person, lovely person, not necessarily syncing up too well with me in terms of how we worked and how we agreed on things. And there was just a confluence of reasons that just like, it might be time to look at going home. And my folks just said, look, if you want to come home, we'll put you up as long as you need to be put up, and you can start looking for jobs, and you don't have to have something to come home. And I did that. I think I came home in October, and I started working for the board in June. So I had a little bit of time. I had a little bit of time to kind of figure out what I was doing, that sort of thing.
So you said it was a dairy, wasn't it? But then you said shorthorns.
Yeah.
And I didn't. So there's a beef and a dairy.
That's correct.
Side?
Yeah. There's beef shorthorns and then there's milking shorthorns, and we have milking
are there?
shorthorns.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't know about the milking shorthorns. You also did something with the Jersey cattle.
Yeah, I worked 7 years for Jersey Canada, doing website, magazine, different stuff there for them.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. So a lot of what we've done on this podcast, we've talked to people who do stuff we've done some livestock. We've had some livestock interviews, a lot of kind of grain, a lot of crop kind of focused extension and research. Potatoes is interesting. I mean, I've grown up around potatoes, like we talked about earlier in the Red River Valley, for sure. Like Quakers and some of these big producers are all around me, but it is a bit of an interesting crop in Canada. And like, you know, I think Jay and I could both probably paint a fairly accurate landscape of what the grain sector looks like outside of potatoes. But can you talk a little bit about
just wait? Why do you say potatoes are interesting? Because that's not a very, very descriptive word. So what makes it interesting to you?
Well, I was going to get to that, Jay. Come on. This whole thing was going to kind of arrive. I was going to a long arc, and then I was going to arrive at this thing.
Okay,
but what make it is interesting in the sense that like the inputs are different. It's a very kind of involved process. Lots of the big potato producers, at least in my area, are into kind of a variety of things. These boards, these commissions operate differently. Like some of them are supply managed, some of them aren't, and you know, and it's a very the marketing side of it is very unique too. So I was just wondering for let's say for like a lay listener, could you paint a bit of a landscape of potato production in Canada? Just broad strokes, kind of what that looks like. I know P.E.I is a big player and talk that up for sure.
Well, and that's the thing about potatoes. Like, so I come from a place where potatoes is king. You know, so agriculture is the number one industry in Prince Edward Island. Has been forever, still is. And then potatoes are half of net cash receipts in PEI. So like potatoes we have lots of other agriculture and lots of other successful agriculture, but potatoes is you know, that's what you set your watch to here. And that's what demands the attention. And it's been like that for decades, if not centuries. Like we started exporting potatoes from PEI in, I think, 1824. And we've been, you know, PEI has been a key player in potatoes for decades and decades and decades. And it was interesting because it was a crop that you could, you know, in the 40s and 50s and earlier, it was a crop that you could make a living on growing 5 acres, 3 acres, you know, like because it's a high value crop with high tonnage per field, right? Or per acre. And so, yes, and it's so specialized, right? And that's what also makes potatoes, like it's very, when you say interesting, it is interesting in the fact that it's incredibly specialized in that it's on that border between like, it's a field crop, but it's not a field crop you can combine and that you can manage like every other field crop. So it's a field crop that you plant on hundreds of acres, but it requires a specialized planter and a specialized windrower and a specialized harvester and maybe other specialized equipment besides. And then once it comes back, you need a specialized storage with specialized conveyors and handling equipment and everything else. And then if you then are into, say you're not growing for processing, but you have a packing shed and you're growing it for, you know, selling it to the grocery store or something, then you need more specialized equipment for grading and sorting and packaging and everything else. So everything about potatoes is you're on the same scale as a lot of people are for growing soybeans or corn or wheat or something else in Prince Edward Island, but I'm doing it at about 10 times the cost of production. So, you know, like, cost of production to grow an acre of corn in PEI is probably what, $400 to $500 an acre or something like that. You know, like if I'm not talking about all the land costs being in there. And to grow an acre of potatoes is comfortably 10 times that. So, you know, like a harvester, a brand new potato harvester, easily $500,000 now, you know, like that sort of thing. And I only get to use it for one crop. And I only get to use it. So I only get to use it on, if I'm on a 3-year rotation, I only get to use it on a third of my acres every year. Whereas if I grow corn, soybeans, and wheat, I use the same harvester on every acre every year, you know? And so, yes, combines are ridiculously expensive now too, but I get to spread that on all of my acres, you know? So that's why some people in PEI that historically have always grown barley or wheat or something after potatoes, they're getting out of growing grain because they can't afford to keep a combine running anymore to grow, you know, to grow 700 acres of grain. How do I have a combine that I'm only using on a third of my acres every year?
I was just going to say, Ryan, is this the motivation for the cover crops? Are they related in some way?
There's a connection there for sure. Like, I think, you know, there's a lot of interest in cover crop work from a yield improvement side and a soil health improvement side and that sort of things. But I think particularly the last few years, like this year particularly, the price of barley is absolutely cratered here the last little while. And the last 2 or 3 years, people have been chasing fusarium head blight in wheat and barley and having crops that can't harvest or that are fail quality and not getting good crops. And then the price per ton went in the crapper beyond that. So, like, there's lots of people planting barley this year knowing they're going to lose money on barley. So do I lose $50 an acre or $100 an acre growing barley? Or do I, like, if I don't grow barley and I grow some other beneficial disease suppressant cash crop or cover crop or some sort of soil building crop that helps with organic matter and nutrient cycling and that sort of thing, or I grow a legume that feeds me a little bit more nitrogen, I only have to get 5 or 10 more hundredweight an acre of potatoes to make up the entire profit margin on the grain that I didn't grow on the year that it actually made money. So, especially where in PEI, again, this is different than in some places. Alberta, nobody grows cover crops between potato crops because there's loads of other crops that they can grow that have local markets or established commodity markets and that they have demand for and handling for and everything. In PEI, where there's only 500,000 arable acres in the whole province and a third of those are in pasture, like, there's only so many, you know, we don't have the infrastructure to grow thousands of acres of canola and soybeans and everything else. So, again, potatoes are big in PEI because we were specialized at them. I've been specialized at them for a long time. But doing it for a long time, we have the infrastructure built up. We have the handling built up. We have the markets built up. We've been able to manage it. But if you're trying to make money on other commodities in PEI, not saying people don't make money and people don't try, but you make money in Prince Edward Island agriculture by either adding value or high value crops to begin with. So like, that's why, like, number 1 is potatoes, number 2 is dairy, which is supply managed and which, you know, is a higher value product, and number 3 is beef. And the only reason we still have a beef industry is because we do have a federally inspected beef plant here, the only one east of Quebec. And then after that, it's like blueberries and fruit and veg and stuff. It's not like most, if not almost all of the grain we grow feeds cattle here. You know, like, we're not sending massive amounts of corn and soybeans to out west because you lose all the profit margin on it. You lose sending it out of here because, you know, there's only 1.5 million, 2 million people live in all of Atlantic Canada. So, like, we don't have that big market that, you know, it will absorb a lot of those commodities. And so they all have to go somewhere else. Whereas if you're we're sending all of our potatoes somewhere else, but we're sending a high value product that you can't get everywhere. Not everybody grows potatoes, especially on this end of the continent. You know, there's only, there's not as many people that grow potatoes.
Are you, is the PEI potato board, is that a supply managed board?
No, and actually none of the commodity boards in Canada are really truly supply managed, in that they don't. There may be some one desk selling in some cases, like in Manitoba, but even that's changed now. There was regulatory changes in Manitoba, but like we're a commodity board or an association, but we don't restrict or manage how potatoes are sold. We keep track of how potatoes are sold, and we provide market information back to producers. So in PEI, it's easier for PEI because everything that leaves here has to leave by boat or by the bridge. So there's only a couple ways off the island. And so any potatoes that leave the province, they have to call us and get a transit number, or get a marketing number. And to get that number, they have to tell us how much they're selling, who they're selling it to, where it's going, what pack size it's going into, what they're selling it for. And we maintain a database with that information. Partially, it's so that we can use that information to collect the levy, which funds our operations. But also, we build this market database, which then we provide information back to the producers of, this is how much 10-pound bags of potatoes are selling to Toronto, and this is how much they're selling to Boston. And so that people are making their marketing decisions, they have good information. They have information on, where they should be in terms of the marketing. We don't tell them what they should sell their potatoes for, but we tell them what everybody else is selling their potatoes for, so that they can make informed decisions. And
that's interesting.
In a commodity that's quite perishable, and you can't just sit on and wait 6 months to see whether the market gets better, it's important to have that good information.
For sure.
How are P.E.I. potatoes marketed? Are they primarily sold as bagged potatoes for grocery stores, or is it French fries or potato chips?
We're about 60% of our acreage or our production would go into processing. So that's a combination of French fry, potato chip, and we have a dehydration plant here as well that mostly takes cull potatoes and then it's like a value reclamation project for the most part. But there is, like, Cavendish Farms has 2 plants here that they make French fries, and they're the single, probably half the potatoes in PEI go to them. And then we have a number of growers that supply a potato chip plant, a Frito-Lay plant over in Nova Scotia. And I'd say 95% of the potatoes that go through that plant are from PEI. And then, we have a few people that grow from McCain's as well, but not very many. And then about 30% is then fresh. So that's going either on farm packed in consumer pack, or maybe going in totes that's going to get repacked somewhere else. That depends a lot on market. If it's within Canada, most of what's going to grocery stores, is getting packed in packages, at the potato packer, and then they're going in whatever package is going to the store, and they're going to the store shelves. A lot of what we send to the United States, we send in totes, like ton totes and that sort of thing, and then maybe they get repacked in the U.S. to go, to grocery stores down there. So again, it depends on the market, depends on the relationships and the how things are marketed, and then about 10% of our acres or 10% of our production is seed. So again, that's another big difference in potatoes versus other crops. We grow potatoes from potatoes, right? We grow vegetative seed, and that vegetative seed has a longer bulk up period in terms of generations to produce seed. And you don't just buy your seed from Pioneer or DeKalb or whoever. You're buying it from the other guy, seed producer 2 towns over or whatever. Like, a lot of the time, like, it's most of the seed that's grown to produce commercially in PEI comes from another grower, and a lot of it's local. So now it may be partially managed through another company, because there are, the processors are involved with seed, the like managing the sort of the pipeline of seed and which varieties and stuff. So there's lots of variety companies out there. Some of them European, some of them American, but it's a complex, big conversation for another day probably. But but seed is, instead of just, I put in my my ask for this many bags of seed and they come in on a truck and or whatever. It's a little more of like a lot of people, they would have a relationship with their seed grower, and they might even go and visit those seed fields the year before, and it's tied to variety and the bulk up between, potatoes start from tissue culture, right? So, and the first generation is in a greenhouse, and then there's a field generation, and it takes 3 or 4 field generations to get towards the seed that's actually going to be planted by the commercial producer. So it takes a little bit of while. There's a lot of risk in that process too. So.
Yeah, it's almost like buying a dog or a horse or something. Like the breed and the story become really important, and you visit the farm, you develop a relationship. Yeah,
trust.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Ryan, I mentioned cover crops a few minutes ago, but I just know from the research perspective, you've got a few cover crop related projects on the go, and it's kind of a trendy term.
It is, yeah.
There's not a lot of, there's a reasonable amount of talk of cover crop on the prairies, but there's not actually many acres of it. But it seems like there's a good business case for it. Just how you were describing earlier on P.E.I. Like, is that what drives a lot of the decisions to look into cover crop as research projects for you?
Yeah, like all of my projects that I work on are informed by what the growers are interested in and what the growers set as priorities. So my program, if the growers aren't interested in it, I'm not going to be looking into it. So, or at least showing some level of interest. And again, cover crops, there's, I always find there's a couple different sides to this, and cover crops are not all, like, they don't mean the same thing to everybody. I try and divide it into two topics. There's full season cover crops, or kind of service crops, which make more sense in a short rotation of high value crops like in P.E.I. than they do probably in Alberta or Manitoba. Mm-hmm. Taking a full year at a rotation to grow, sorghum Sudan grass, may only make sense here, may not make as much sense there. Mm-hmm. Not saying somebody may not have a reason to do it, but they make the business case and the rationale is probably higher here. And also, like, multi-purpose crops, like, do you define alfalfa as a cover crop? Like some people would. Some people would say, oh, no, that's a cash crop because I'm going to sell hay or I'm going to pasture it or whatever. But, there's lots of people here growing alfalfa and just mowing it down, as a nitrogen source, as a nitrogen credit, or as a compaction fighter or something else like that, right? So again, it's sort of, there's not one recipe for everybody, but we've been growing, our standard rotation in P.E.I. for 100 years has been potatoes, small grain, forage crop, because the small grain and the straw got fed to or bedded livestock, and then the forage crop got fed to livestock. And when we had fully integrated potato and livestock industry here, that all ran tickety-boo. And when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, like, my farm had 40 acres of potatoes and 30 cows, milk cows, and 30 beef cows, and it was all integrated. Now we don't grow potatoes. We rent 40 or 50 acres a year out to potato guys, and we have 85 cows and have 30 or 40 beef cows. So we've specialized more in the livestock, and that's largely those mixed farms. There's almost none of them left anymore. So people have specialized more, just like they have everywhere else. But those farms still exist, and they still have that sort of connectivity, and there still is a value for those pasture and forage crops. And my hope is to do more research and do more work on reintegration of livestock in the potato industry, to mutual benefit of everybody. But that's why I'm doing some work on grazing and different cover crops as well. But it's an easier stretch for somebody that's already growing a crop that's maybe marginally returning any cash flow to go from growing clover to growing some other different cover crop than somebody that says, oh, I grow a cash crop every year, and now you're telling me 1 year I'm not going to grow a cash crop. That's more of a stretch. So that rationale or that business case is easier to manage in P.E.I. But then there's what I would call more the fall cover crop, and that's where I have probably a greater passion. And it's about, because in Prince Edward Island, we have longer falls, we have lots of precipitation, and we have highly erodible soils. So how do we preserve our fields, preserve the production capacity of our fields and the profitability of our farms, keep soil out of the rivers, do things that are both environmentally beneficial, but also beneficial to the long-term viability of our farms. And that's keeping the soil in the field. And that's also, can we be retaining soil moisture? Can we be retaining nitrogen, carrying over nitrogen? If we have leftover nitrogen after a potato crop here in our high precipitation, sandy soils, it's gone. Like it's gone. It's all either leached out or gone as nitrous oxide. 10% of it might be left the next year. So if we can have a cover crop that carries some of that over, there's benefits to that too. So I've been putting a lot of focus more on the fall covers and building both the business case and the agronomic case for it. Again, it fits in a system like ours where water is usually not a limitation. Building the case for fall cover crops is a lot easier.
But what we want to get into, Ryan, is like the actual extension of information. Those conversations with the farmers on deciding what research to do.
Right.
So you have those conversations, and then then how do you, once you've done the research, then how do you extend it?
When I first started this job, like I wasn't massively passionate about cover crops or fall covers, but it was getting the experience and working with the producers. There were producers that were doing fall cover cropping here, and they were seeing some benefit from it. And then there was a increasing interest in the industry in fall covers from an academic and a research side. And then more growers started getting into it. And then we had this Living Labs project that came to P.E.I. And then it was, well, here's an ability to do this work together with growers, taking the lead from growers in what they want us to look at. And one of the things they wanted to look at is we're hearing a lot about cover crops. We want to see like what's the best way to do it, and do they move the needle on anything, and how does that all work? And then as we get into that and start building some critical mass of trials, and I was doing multiple trials with multiple growers over a few years, and then we start generating some results that actually were showing that fall covers before potatoes in our system, where normally people were plowing down a forage crop with no cover crop and having that ground bare to the winter, and very vulnerable to erosion, very vulnerable to nitrogen loss. Changing that by introducing a fall cover, not only were we seeing some of those environmental benefits, but we were seeing a 8 to 10% yield bump in the potato crop. We were seeing that on most of the trials. Like, I think if some people talk, if you're doing lots of trials over multiple years and they talk about what's your win rate on trials or whatever, we were like 85% that were coming out with a benefit on yield where we had a cover. And I think that's because, again, it was carrying over nutrients, it was carrying over nitrogen, it was protecting soil, it was maybe feeding the soil microbial community, that sort of thing. So we were seeing some of this benefit in our system. And so what we saw is that, again, it's not top down and it's not all bottom up. I think it's a combination of both. And what we saw is then basically from the start of that process of when we first started talking about and really doing research on cover crops to today, we've gone from probably about 25% cover crop acres in the potato rotation to about 50 to 60%. So we have seen this big uptick where the early adopters are seeing the benefits from the research and from the extension of the research, and then the other growers are seeing their neighbors doing it and seeing why they're having successes doing it. And then the early adopters are refining ways to make it, how can I do it better, cheaper, easier? So now a lot of people, like if they're terminating alfalfa in August, and then they're going in with their Lemkin or Pottinger, tillage machine, and then they got an APV seeder on the tillage machine that's seeding the cover crop at the same time. So it's just one pass. So then I don't have to go in and do it another pass in the field. My only cost is the seed. I'm not fertilizing it. I'm not doing anything else. So if all my cost is a seed and I don't have another guy tied up in another tractor with another piece of gear, it's a lot easier conversation to have, right? So again, it's about trying to look at it systemically. Like, I'm not looking at it academically. I'm not trying to get a paper published. I'm just trying to see what works for the growers and how does it fit into their systems. And if I talk to the growers, their number one limitation is always time and people. So how do I find a way to make it work in that, if I try and come to them and say, I got this great thing that's going to save you all, or it's going to make you $200 an acre, but it's going to take another person in another piece of gear, or it's going to take a whole lot more paperwork, they'll leave money on the table.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because they don't have time to manage it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just a lot of projects that we've been trying to look at here with the potato board and with our agronomy initiative have been really focused on win-win things. So things that can be worked into existing farms without massive rethinking, without massive change. They're incremental changes, little bits of things that we can do better that have both an environmental benefit as well as an economic benefit. So,
Ryan, you said there's only 500 potato growers in Canada. How many on the island there? Fewer than 100, I'm guessing.
my number might be not 100% right, but I
Yeah.
know we have about
Yeah.
100.
That's fine.
We have
Yeah.
about 150, 160 in
Okay.
PEI, something like
Well,
that.
so how do you have those? I mean, it seems like a number where you're not going to have necessarily one-on-one conversations with 150 people, but um, so when it comes to gathering the research ideas and then extending the results, what with that group, what's the best techniques for both the gathering and the sharing? Is there, maybe it's the same technique, maybe you do different things, but I just want to know what are your tactics?
Well, on the gathering side, like on the getting, when we started, we did a very comprehensive consultation with producers, trying to kind of get at what their priorities were, what their challenges were, what they thought the opportunities were. And we did that through small group meetings, larger group meetings, email surveys. We kind of tried to come at it from a few different angles.
Mm.
Got a pretty decent level of engagement, probably talked to at least half of the potato producers in PEI in some fashion.
Through one of those
Uh,
four methods.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then put a bit of a plan together, and then the big success of our AIM program, or our agronomy initiative for marketable yield, is we have three different working groups on different sort of topic areas. So we have one around seed and tuber quality, one around soil, and one around science and tech, or kind of it's a bit of a catch-all. But I have growers on each of those working groups as well. So I have technical specialists from different partners like the Department of Ag and Agriculture Canada
Mm.
and Cavendish Farms, but I also have growers. And
Mm.
so they're keen, interested growers who they either have ideas for projects, or they have ideas that other people tell them, or they just want to put their hand up to try something and try a trial and that sort of thing. So again, it's try not to be top down, try to be as bottom up as we can, but within reason. Like then there's my role is, not every grower's got the time to go to meetings and conferences and scour through literature all winter. So then they say, Ryan, I want you to go to such and such conference. I want you to go to Manitoba Potato Production Days and hear
Mhm.
what's happening out there, and then take home the thing that they're doing that maybe we should try and run it through our working group and see whether we agree. And if we agree and we want to put a PEI twist on it, and we try things out. So again, I think it's co-development. It's working with the producers to get as many good ideas from them as to what's going to move, what are their biggest challenges, and how can we, with common sense, move the needle for them. But then also, what am I hearing from other people in the network? How do I build the network and then have stuff coming back from the network?
Which of those
So
which of those methods do you think is the most effective at encouraging adoption of an idea? So you said email, you said survey, and you said small groups and then large groups, or maybe it was small focus groups, and then more of an event. Like
yeah, and
my
that
gut
was
would
for like
say it's the small focus groups. But
yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
think?
What's most successful?
And that list was really focused on the sort of the initial like data intel getting, like, making a plan.
Right.
On the push out on the extension, you're right. It very much is the small groups. So like, we've been doing a potato conference here forever. We've been doing, people have been generating fact sheets forever.
Yeah.
But what we really found is still need to do those things, because everybody learns in different ways. Everybody takes in information in different ways. But where we've kind of changed things too is then doing half day meetings, half day workshops on one topic, where I bring in a speaker from somewhere. They could be local, they could be from elsewhere. Bring in a speaker, and we're only going to talk about this one thing for a morning. And
Mm.
I'm going to bring coffee or donuts or whatever,
Hmm.
and we're going to talk about that thing. And it's only going to be 20 to 40 people in the room, and you'll have a chance to ask questions, because when we have a PEI potato conference or potato expo, and you have great speakers from wherever, but they're talking for half an hour on a topic, and they usually go over their time, and there's no time for questions, and
Yeah.
people don't want to stand up in front of 200 people and ask a question, but they will stand up in front of 20 of their neighbors and ask a question because they figure all those people all probably have the same question. And if they don't even want to ask the question, then they'll at least internalize it, think about it, and ask me about the question on the drive home or the next day or something.
Hmm.
So I found those local meetings is where we've had definitely more traction in getting BMP adoption and generating more ideas. Again, the next project or the next iteration of the project or the next big problem. And I've tried to find a good balance in those local meetings of also like I try to find a balance between researchers and agronomists and even just producers.
Hmm.
So like usually the ones where I have a producer is the most attended ones that we do. So last winter I had Chad Berry from Manitoba. He farms out like
Yeah.
where is it, like Desborough area there, and like I had him for half a day, like 3 meetings over 2 days, and like people love that, like people really love being able to just bounce things off of somebody, their peer, right? And somebody that they can kind of associate with. But they also get value from the agronomist and the researcher that
Sure.
is maybe on a different level.
So the let's think about like the structure of that meeting or that morning. Is there an agenda, presentation, or is it just like let's farmers, you ask whatever questions, and we've got this experienced farmer from Manitoba, we've got these experts, they're going to help answer the question. Like, is it almost like a free for all
No, it
discussion, or
does
is it
come.
a set agenda?
It comes with an agenda, but it's not an overly prescribed agenda. So I have a topic. So the topic today is Colorado potato beetles, or the topic today is, you know, precision agriculture or something like that. Like I have a topic, and I ask my guest speaker to come in and talk for an hour to an hour and a half on that topic and their experience, their research, their, whatever their relationship to that topic is, where there's lots of time for questions. And then at the end, I then also then talk for 45 minutes to an hour about the research that we're doing locally on that same topic.
Hmm.
So, and then I can relate to them, so I've got this experience or I've got this person from somewhere else or maybe local that has lots to share on this topic area. And there's lots to learn there. And then I can also talk to you, how does that relate to what we're doing through our program as well? And then hopefully it's a way of getting, we attract them in with the guest speaker, and then they also get to hear about what we're doing here locally too. So usually I have, last winter I had speakers here to talk about a disease in potatoes, common scab, causes the potatoes to be kind of gross looking. It's caused by bacteria, and so I had 2 speakers in from Agriculture Canada to talk about their research in common scab. But then after the break, after we get top up the coffee, I talk about also the work I'm doing on common scab and soil, like tuber quality projects and stuff like that. So we can kind of bridge the local and the external.
So in the 3 hour meeting, however, not much time you've set aside, would it be an hour of total Q&A? Or like, do you make sure that, or how do you make sure that
There's probably an hour in there. Yeah, like we often the topics we usually just say ask questions as you go
Oh
along,
yeah.
right? And that's
Mhm.
usually the way it goes.
So
And
within the 90 minutes then that would just be like there may be a few slides, but I mean it's that kind of ongoing conversation. Okay, I like that. Yeah.
And again, it's depends on the speaker. If I get a ag researcher from a university or from um, Agriculture Canada, they got lots of slides. They got lots to talk
Yeah,
about, for good reason, right? And so oftentimes we don't even get through all the slides.
Yeah.
If I bring a farmer, usually what I tell the farmer is put a slide deck together that's just a bunch of pictures from your farm.
Sure.
Put a bunch of pictures from the field and let's talk about them, right?
Yeah.
And so and that's usually how those usually end up going.
Do you think
So
that the university researchers and the Ag Canada researchers could learn something from that technique?
Yeah, or just to add on to that question, like do you bring your communications kind of background and interest into these kinds of meetings?
Well, I mean, I think we can all learn about how to communicate more effectively and how to make better presentations. Like I'm still guilty of putting too many words on
Oh,
my
for sure.
slide decks, like, because people want to see the slide deck later and then they want to be able to learn from that if they couldn't get to the meeting. So
Yeah.
there's there's lots of ways we can do things better. I think it's trying to find the right balance. Sometimes the presentation that's no words and just pictures is good, but sometimes you'd like to have something to ground it in a little bit too. But it's all depends on who's speaking. If I get somebody in that's got 30 years experience working in potato research, like, they've got a lot to share. They got a lot of wisdom to
Hmm.
share, and the growers want to hear that too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I think it's fitting the format to the producer, or sorry, to the presenter, making sure there's lots of freedom and ability for people to interact. I've now moved to I record all of those at
Yeah.
least like, so usually we do 3 half days over 2 days. So if I'm flying somebody in, I can fly them in on a Monday. They can do sessions on Tuesday, Wednesday, and I can either fly them home Friday afternoon or Wednesday afternoon or Thursday. So they're not doesn't kill the whole week. But I usually the third meeting of the three, after we've kind of worked out the kinks, we record the last one, and then I make them available on YouTube. And I mean,
Nice.
10 people might see it, 100 people
Yeah.
might see it, like, but it's, if somebody was taking their kid to hockey that day, or somebody was shipping potatoes that day and they wanted to be able to see it, they can see it. And
Right.
setting up a camcorder in the back of the room doesn't cost any money, so
Yeah.
it's pretty easy. Is it top production value? No, but it's something that people can get to access it.
But if you've got 150 potato farmers on the island, and 10 people watch the recording, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot of people, but that's a great big percentage of your audience that's had a chance to see it that might not have seen it otherwise. So just
Sure.
the numbers can be deceiving when it comes to
Yep.
views
Yep.
of a really key video.
I
And
would,
like, we have farms where, like, okay, there's 4 or 5 principal guys working on one farm, and one guy got to the meeting, but
sure.
the other guys were getting stuff done at home or were away or something. And if you're having meetings in February and March, you're competing with you know Cancun, and you're competing with Vegas, and you're competing with a few other places. So I like to have flexibility so people can access this information, or even
Yeah.
the guys that were at the meeting and they want to watch it back to, oh, I might have missed something, or
Yeah.
I didn't take a picture of that slide I wanted to look at or something, right? So
Yeah.
One thing I want to just kind of come back to before it gets kind of lost or forgotten is, Ryan, you said regarding presentations, fitting the format to the presenter. And I think that's a really, I know you just said it and it was part of the conversation, and it's a good, but that's a really good thing. Because I've talked to people, and Jay and I have run workshops on presentation skills, right? And we do kind of have a canned like approach to how to create a presentation, but the subtext, or what's not said, is exactly what you said. If you are a really good speaker, or if you come in and you got this charisma coming out of your pores, like, you don't need a great presentation. Your presentation could be terrible, but or your slide deck
Slides,
your
yeah.
slide deck could be terrible, but you are really interesting. So I don't know. I think there's something really there that needs to be that needs to be talked. We can't just put kind of these layers onto these things and assume it works every time. It does depend on who the presenter is. It does depend on who the audience is. I like that.
And some people are more comfortable presenters than others, right?
Sure.
And like, I have sometimes people come in and present, and it's an interesting topic, but they're not potato people. And so they're talking to a group of people they don't know. Sometimes they're potato people and they are very comfortable talking about their subject matter, but they don't know anything about PEI, or they don't know,
Mhm.
maybe it's something different. Like the last winter before last, like, I brought in a seed producer from England and had them talk about how they grow seed in England. Well, it's still potatoes, but there's a lot of differences between how you grow seed potatoes in England versus growing them in PEI. Lots of commonalities as well, but, like, so in that case, it's like, tell us about what you do, tell us about why you do what you do. And these presentations aren't about coming in and telling farms you shall do this. It's about, this is what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and or this is what I've been finding, or this is what we've been seeing in our research, and maybe that could work for you, and maybe this is something we can dig into a little bit more and find the commonalities or find where, where things might be there might be a common thread that we can
Right.
latch
But
onto,
let
right?
but
And I
let
think
let the audience kind of make those connections. But if you're just telling your
exactly.
story, my experience, my story, etc., I think that uh, to me more relate more to the audience than just kind of like a prescriptive list of you shall do this kind of thing.
And in growers, like you guys would know, like there are producers that very open-minded and they go to every conference and they want to hear new ideas and they want to take those new ideas home and try new things. And then there's producers that say, how dare you come here and try and tell me how to farm? I've been farming for 50 years and I farm the same way my father farmed, and that's fine. And so I got to try and find a way in the middle there of like, okay, I don't want anybody feeling like I have people coming in and tell them how to farm, but I want people to come in and say, from our experience, this has worked or this hasn't worked.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you guys can learn from what we've done or haven't done and then tinker around with it on your own farms and see what works and doesn't work. And is it something that you want to try here or something you want to at least try one field or part of one field or, play around with things. So I think that's how we've been trying to approach it is try not to be very top down, try not to be very prescriptive. Where I have seen extension and efforts and BMP adoption efforts fail in the potato industry is when they've been too top down and too
Yeah.
prescriptive
Mm.
and too formulaic, and you don't get the grower buy-in. And if you don't get the grower buy-in, it just dies.
Yeah.
So if you can try and at least start at the bottom, get a certain critical mass of growers that own it and say, there's value in this. We want to be part of the making the solution. We understand that there are challenges and we want to be part of that, and then build on top of that. And that's kind of what we're trying to do.
So we're getting near to the end, Ryan, but we want to. I want to talk about because you said to our colleague Ashley in the pre-interview about you like comedy, and I think comedy actually. I mean, it's fun, but it can also be an effective extension tool. Like, so do you use comedy in a way to break the ice? Do you tell jokes, or do you try to be self-deprecating in humor, or like is
I'm not a good joke teller. Like I love comedy of all kinds, especially stand-up comedy, and I like that's probably most of what I watch and a lot of what I listen to, comedy podcasts and stuff. But
Oh, that's
I
funny.
inherited a gene from my father that makes it unable to properly tell a joke. So I either say it wrong or I trip over it or I say the punchline at the wrong time or something. I don't have that comic timing. I'm kind of if I'm just chatting with my coworkers or whatever, like we can kid around and I can be funny and whatever, but I'd never be a stand-up comic because can't I can't deliver. I don't have that comic timing down. So I
Yeah.
don't try and be a comedian. But I try and be humorous, or I try and be make people feel comfortable being there, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's
try
good.
not to be overly officious and try not to be overly, run by schedule, and try and make people feel comfortable in being somewhere, right? I
Yeah.
Yeah,
think that's a big part of it.
yeah. No, that's awesome. Do you have any like who is your favorite comedian right now?
Oh, I mean, I probably have on my top five. I mean, Chappelle, uh, Tommy Tiernan from Ireland is definitely one of
Okay.
my favorites. I've seen him a couple times in PEI, thankfully. Jim Gaffigan,
Uh-huh.
Patton Oswalt, um, John Mulaney. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really top guys. I really, I, yeah, I watch a lot of comedy, and and a lot of I like dense writing. So I don't like, formulaic, multi-camera, ha-ha sitcom. I like, dense comedy like 30 Rock and Parks and Recreation and like those kinds of like joke, joke, joke,
Yeah.
joke, 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 joke. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
my type of comedy, So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. So barbecue. I mean, you also talked about, barbecue is a big, you're a big fan.
Mhm.
Do you have a recipe? Like, do you have a burger recipe that you
Yeah.
go to?
Oh, nothing that you're like, oh, I have to do this. I
Try me.
I tinker and play around and um I have the luxury of a fairly low cost to free supply of ground beef from home, so I can tinker and play around and that sort of stuff. But um, I find I used to make them. I used to be bad. I used to be really bad at them because I did it like my father, and my father was if if some heat was good, more heat was better,
Right.
and
Yeah.
if
Just black
10
pot.
minutes was good, 20 minutes was amazing, and then they should be black like hockey pucks.
Yeah.
And that's not how I do meat anymore. And I try and be a little bit better. I think the big thing, a little bit of salt to release the flavor in the beef is important. And if you want to play around with that in terms of where that salt comes from, I actually find a little bit of soy sauce
Mm-hmm.
in it is good for that. I don't think that's anything new, but that's how I've been doing it. I try not to be too much breadcrumbs or too much filler. I try and stay as much meat as possible. And then, yeah, try and not grill the absolute hell out of it and let it be its
Yeah.
own thing. But my big thing for burgers is like so Prince of Rhode Island every April has a promotion or has a short-term restaurant promotion called Burger Love, P.E.I. Burger Love, and like dozens and dozens of burgers all make their burger. And there's a
Yeah.
website. You go on the website and find out all the burgers, and you can go and get them and whatever. And it's celebration of PEI beef. But every restaurant, most of the restaurants make the same mistake of just piling more stuff on the burger to the point that the burger is unedible because it's a
Yeah.
foot high and
Yeah.
there's just so many kinds of goop and everything on it when they always neglect that the burger is the star of the burger is the burger. So
Right.
make the burger good and then add a few things to accompany it.
Yeah.
And that's way more important. I come from the Ron Swanson school of
Yeah.
making burgers.
I like that.
It's
Speaking of
like,
Parks and Rec.
get your meat and do
Yeah.
your meat right. And then if you have cheese and, a few
Yeah.
condiments on it, great, but you don't have to have 20 things on it,
I
right?
never want to see a beet on my hamburger.
You're making me very hungry.
Yeah.
Really.
I actually would eat a beet on a hamburger, but anyway, I'm just thinking of what Ron Swanson would say.
Yeah.
Right, Ryan, when you think of young farmers on PEI, like is part of your, I'm not going to say your job, but your passion trying to, encourage the next generation. Does that come into it at all? And like, is PEI different in that regard, or is it the same in PEI as anywhere else?
I mean, I think there's definitely a common trend over most of agriculture that our primary operators tend to be older, but there are quite a few younger people coming through the industry at the moment. And there's just been a re-energization of the PEI Young Farmers group here after a bit of a dormancy around COVID and even a little bit before COVID. And I think it's re-energizing a little bit of passion in the industry and a little bit more interest. Farming on PEI in general is at a smaller scale than it is in some places. Like, there aren't 10,000 acre farms in PEI and that sort of thing. So if you are trying to get in on on the ground floor, maybe it's a little less daunting
Mm.
if you're growing 500 acres than 5,000. Um, but that being said, there's a lot of risk and a lot of cost that comes with getting into the potato industry. And so, and it's tough to just, especially with the capital involved, it is tough. And if your family doesn't already farm, it's tough. But
Mm.
we are seeing, like, I'm seeing examples here of, young guys that come from maybe families that don't farm themselves, or maybe their grandfathers farmed, but their dads didn't, and they really want to farm.
Mm.
And then they're going to work for existing farmers, and then they're working their way into succession
Hmm.
after working for that farmer for 5 or 10 years or something, right? And so I've seen that happening here more
Right.
than we have in the past. And I think that's great. Where we also need to focus is on our next generation of agronomists.
Mm.
And in PEI, for some reason, we've we're we underspend and under build capacity for agronomy than probably anywhere else in the potato industry. And like we have some really great agronomists, but they're 65 plus with no summer students and no junior agronomists and nobody working with them.
Oh, yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just cowboys or just one or two person operations, right? So we're not building that next generation. So that's why, like within my here at the board, I have a junior agronomist who, basically it's an entry level position and they're helping me with my trials, but hopefully we're building some capacity. They're mostly straight out of school and they're getting some experience. And my hope is that in 2 or 3 years they take another job. That they go and take a job with either a farm or another agronomy firm or a supplier or the government or somebody that. But hopefully we're retaining them in the industry. So I actually have two working with me at the moment, and my hope is that like we're building some of that capacity because we need as farms get bigger, and often with the same amount of management, um, there's not enough hours in the day to do everything, and you can't do everything well just by yourself.
Yeah.
So you need more help and you need more people. And I am the agronomist for 155 farms in one way, but I can't be the agronomist for 155 farms, if you know what I mean. So,
Yeah.
so they need additional help and they need additional services. And so I think some farms have seen that, like, are all on board and they've hired their own on-farm agronomist or they hire the services of somebody. And more are trying to kind of figure out how to get there. And so again, but you need the capacity, you need the people, you need the human resources to sort of build that. So, and we only have one ag school in the Maritimes over in Dalhousie, and there hasn't been a lot of kids from PEI going there just recently. We're trying to re-energize that as well. But when I went there, probably a quarter of the kids there were from PEI, and now it's a fraction of that. So hopefully we can build more capacity that then helps make farming a little bit easier, or at
Yeah.
least the
Yeah.
management
Yeah.
of farming a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. I know we've covered like a wide variety of topics here, from
Yeah.
burgers and comedy to extension. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention that we haven't talked about?
No, not really. I mean, just I don't come at this as anybody that's got everything all worked out. Like, I'm figuring things out as we're going along too. Like, as we said, I came at this when I grew up growing 40 acres of potatoes at home. I hated potatoes. Because all I associated, we grew seed potatoes. I associated with roguing fields, walking up and down, pulling out diseased plants in the heat of the sun. All I saw was the risk involved because at that time there was a lot of risk in growing seed potatoes. There was years where, with trade embargoes and things and the cost, we weren't getting the cost of production back. And I was seeing people going out of business. And I just thought, why in the name of fortune would anybody go near potatoes? And over time, things improve, things change, things professionalize, things specialize. I come back after being away from that for more than 10 years and come back and see, oh, my perspective on that's a little different, and there's a different side to potatoes and I can see the value. I mean, it still is a lot of hard work and it still is a lot of risk, but I think, there is a future in it. I really enjoy working in the industry, but I learn something every day. And I think one of the key things in extension is if you don't know the answer to something, don't BS people.
Yeah,
And don't try and sound like you know the answer to people. Say, I don't know, but I'm going to help you find out.
right.
So I'm going to talk to someone else in my network who does know the answer, or I'm going to do a little literature search and try and figure that out for you. And that's what I learned, especially coming to it without, I didn't have a crop science degree. I had plant science courses. I did my CCAs, I'm an active CCA, that sort of thing. But like, I didn't feel confident that like every time you ask me, okay, what's the planting depth I should plant, Sudan grass at? I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm going to find that out and I'm going to get back to you. But I'm not going to BS you and say, this is what you should go and do because it erodes trust. People figure that stuff out pretty quick. Most people have a pretty good radar for BS. So you have to be,
Yeah.
you have to say, I'm going to work with you and figure this out.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, awesome.
Well, that's wonderful. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah,
It's great
thanks.
chatting with you.
Thanks so
I
much.
appreciate the invite.
That was a great conversation. I'm going to come back to one thing. You took issue with the fact that I said the word, I was calling potatoes interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to kind of dive into that a little bit here.
Right. Well, I think you had some thoughts in your head.
Yeah.
I just wanted to encourage you to share them, because interesting doesn't really tell me anything.
Yeah, but I did. I went.
But
I got there. I got there.
Were you going to get there without me prompting you?
I was.
Okay.
I was. I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wanted to say yes now to defend myself, but whether I was or not, I don't know.
No,
yes,
I just think
yes, Jay.
Like, and it's not like I'm the guy who never says the word interesting, but I just mean it's not a good expression of really anything of substance.
It's not descriptive. No. And I was going to, because part of me bringing it up now is that potatoes are interesting, kind of amid that, or they're unique, or they stand out a little bit in this crop grain world, right? Because they, like he said, it was, your inputs are different, your machinery is different, the market is different. It's kind of a bit of an outlier in that grain landscape. Like, what do they do, right? I know they're farmers, and they mingle with farmers, but the day-to-day is very different.
Yeah,
like marketing is so different. It's a very interesting industry that way. Now I'm very.
But they seem to be, again, I haven't seen the books of a potato grower, but they seem to be successful.
Yes,
with all of the input costs. Like I can imagine that a bank or a lender would be very supportive of someone who came in and said, we're thinking about getting into potatoes, especially if they had a good record already, obviously. But I think it would be something that a bank might jump on, because it seems like it's a lucrative side of agriculture.
It seems like an industry that's kind of merciless to those who can't make it. Like,
oh yeah,
I don't know that. I'm just like, this is from outside looking in. Like, you don't, because you don't see too many that are just kind of, limping along. Like it seems like, I wonder.
Yeah, you don't limp along for long before you get
chewed up, or whatever, spat out.
And then maybe this is one of those classic scenarios where I need to say I don't know, because I actually don't know. That is just because Ryan was saying that's really important in extension, is to say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to look into that for you.
Well, even I agree, and even like the landscape, the Canadian potato landscape, just it is. Yeah, like P.E.I, Manitoba, Alberta, BC. Like it has its own kind of story to tell, for sure. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. Ryan, it was a great conversation. Very, very, very informative, I thought.
I just think of, at its root, hamburger and fries should be healthier. And I think if you make it in your home farm kitchen, it probably is.
Yeah,
because it's potatoes and it's beef.
Yeah,
which are chock full of all kinds of useful nutrients, proteins and everything else.
Go ahead.
So all I'm saying is that I've got a bad reputation, maybe because of salt and because of fat and fast food and everything else. But at their cores, they're both really strong, healthy ingredients.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to wrap up.
Let's do it.
Sorry, did you have... I feel like I cut you off. But anyway, that's a good way to wrap up. Hamburgers and fries are good for you.
I think we're just going to go get some right away.
We should. Till next time, I'm Jay Whetter.
And I'm Toban Dyck.
And this is The Extensionists.
Thanks for listening.
This has been a Burr Forest Group production. We also want to thank the people you don't see.
We're here, we're chatting away with our guests. But there's tons of people who work behind the scenes to make this podcast happen.
Ryan Sanchi is our director.
Ashley Robinson is the coordinator.
And Abby Wall is our producer and editor.